So in this episode, Daenerys' closest advisors know she's about to do horrible things to the people of King's Landing, and they're in something of a panic. Varys is known to use children for spying purposes, and it looks like he also uses them for assassination purposes because this girl who works in the kitchen told him that Daenerys isn't eating. It's not explicitly stated, but other folks have pointed out that Varys was probably trying to get this kid to poison Daenerys, and I think that makes sense. Daenerys gives Missandei's slave collar to Grey Worm, and he threw it in the fire. I'm not sure what this means, but I suspect he didn't want to remember Missandei by something that represented her enslavement. I think this scene was meant to remind us of the bitterness that he feels about her death, so it makes more sense when he decides to start murdering people who have dropped their weapons and surrendered. The Golden Company turned out to be pretty useless. Daenerys burned most of them pretty quickly, it seemed, and Grey Worm took care of Harry Strickland. Clegane Bowl happened, and it did not disappoint. Well, it didn't disappoint me, at least. I love that line when the Mountain's helmet gets knocked off, and the Hound was like, "Oh yeah, that's you. That's what you've always been." There were a couple of things that annoyed me about Clegane Bowl, though. The first was that Cersei just saunters on by the Hound before the fight breaks out. I know the Hound just figures that she'll be dead soon anyway, so he doesn't bother stopping her. But why does Cersei just seem to assume that she can casually walk on past him? The other thing that bothered me was that the Mountain looked like he was gouging the Hound's eyes out, but after the Hound stabs the Mountain in the eye, the Hound's eyes look fine, even though they were bleeding profusely. He doesn't seem to have completely lost his vision. At first, it seemed as though Daenerys was prepared to accept a surrender. Tyrion told her to call off the attack if King's Landing rang the bells and opened the gates, and she nodded to Grey Worm as though she was telling him to follow those instructions. And Grey Worm did accept the surrender for a time, so why did Daenerys change her mind? I think it would have been better if she had just seen Cersei smirking at her from the Red Keep or something like that. It would have made more sense to me if there had just been one more thing to push her over the edge. But maybe she never intended to accept a surrender. Maybe she figured she'd placate Tyrion by telling Grey Worm to accept a surrender, when all the while she fully intended to burn the whole city. So I guess the prophecy of the Valonqar didn't come true. Neither of Cersei's brothers killed her. She and Jaime died under a pile of rubble while Daenerys is destroying King's Landing. Looking back at that scene with Brienne, I think Jaime felt guilty about having seduced her. Brienne is a pretty great, honorable person, and she really is way too good for Jaime. I think he realized that and thought, I gotta get back to King's Landing to die with Cersei. I don't deserve to retire in relative comfort in the north with this awesome lady. That makes sense to me, and I like the fact that he made that choice. When Daenerys was burning the Iron Fleet, I thought it was a bit easy. If it was that easy, why didn't she do it after Rhaegal was killed? The way I would have written that scene is I would have had Drogon get hit a couple of times. I would have had a couple of the ballista arrows go through his wing membranes, just a couple of superficial wounds, but something. The pacing in this season is really strange in that there are long stretches of character interaction that don't really advance the plot or develop the most drastic character arcs. Rather, both plot development and character development occurs in short, unrealistically sudden bursts. The defeat of the Night King seemed a bit sudden, Jaime's turn seemed a bit sudden even though I thought it made sense, and Daenerys' turn, while telegraphed, still seemed quite rushed. When Daenerys is burning the city, the wildfire her dad planted underneath it started to ignite, and I was a bit disappointed that it didn't make a bigger explosion. It only added to the fire a little bit. I was underwhelmed by that. The Hound told Arya to go home and that she didn't want to become like him, and this was enough to convince her to give up on killing Cersei and to try to get out of the city. This too seemed a bit easy. The way I would have written it is I would have had Arya getting distracted by people crying for help and getting separated from the Hound in that way. That would seem far more consistent with her character. The horse at the end seemed to have appeared out of nowhere, and that was a bit annoying. Hopefully it turns out that Bran had warged into it or something. It looks like it might be Harry Strickland's horse. It looks the same, and its bridle looks like it might be the same. His horse was knocked over when Daenerys burned the front gate of the city, but it wasn't clear that it died. One of the things I'm most looking forward to in the next episode is how Davos reacts to everything that's happened. Daenerys has become like Melisandre, essentially, but like way worse, so I can't see him being complacent with her being queen.